morning from Brussels. Dear official guests, dear partners, speakers, and attendees, dear cluster members and friends, it is my great pleasure and honor to extend to you all a very warm welcome to the 7th edition of the European Cluster Conference. My name is Theodora from Bulgaria, Veritas Cluster, and I will be your guide during the next 2 conference days. Though this year the event is in a virtual format, it will bring together over 1,000 participants. We have more than 52 countries. We have cluster policymakers, cluster managers, business practitioners, researchers, financial providers, training organizations, and stakeholders. The event is organized by the European Commission's Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, with the support of the European Cluster Collaboration Platform and in partnership with the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy under the German Presidency of the Council of the EU. The European Cluster Conference is an opportunity to discuss the role of clusters in post-COVID recovery, find out about the work of the European Expert Group on Clusters, exchange ideas and best practices, vote for the European Cluster Manager of the Year 2020, and team up and network. Today's program is dynamic, following various formats, from keynote presentations, roundtable discussions, quiz, and word cloud exercises, opportunities for networking, exhibiting, visiting, and much more. While being with us throughout the course of the day, don't forget to share your thoughts and comments on social media and make your presence even more effective. And now, please join me in welcoming Ulla Engelmann, the Head of Social Economy Unit at the European Commission's Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, for the opening remarks and official start of the event. Ulla, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear me well. Okay, it's a real pleasure for me to welcome you today to the 7th edition of the European Cluster Conference. Let me first start by thanking the German Presidency for teaming up with us in organizing this conference. In the past few months, we have been witnessing the massive work clusters have undertaken to help to overcome the crisis we are experiencing today. We have been intensively liaising with the representatives of clusters on the ground to understand, to follow and to support local actions towards recovery and resilience. Therefore, this conference comes at a very timely moment, a moment where member states are preparing their national recovery plans and regions their operational programs, where industry faces unprecedented challenges and needs to rethink on the long run how it functions in all aspects. Therefore, this conference is an occasion to come back on the lessons we have learned, to discuss the role in the recovery from the crisis and the challenges it poses today. We also take the opportunity to explore in depth the role of clusters in the 14 industrial ecosystems we identified and exchange ideas how clusters can support the recovery of the different ecosystems. We will be sharing with you the recommendations drafted by our European Cluster Expert Group after 1 year of intensive discussions. But this conference will be an opportunity for each and every one of you to exchange, to network, to hear from the experience from others, and to vote the European Cluster Manager of the year 2020. And also, we will give an award on the European Strategic Cluster Partnership of the year 2020. So I invite all of you to engage with us in the next 2 days to bring your ideas, your enthusiasm, experience, and to co-create with us future actions. I wish you all a very successful and interactive conference. And I give now the floor to my colleague, Director Stefan Schnorr from the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulla. And as you said, to continue with the opening remarks, we will visit our conference studio in Berlin to welcome on the stage Mr. Stefan Schnorr, Head of Digital and Innovation Policy Department at the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Dear Mrs. Yilkova, dear Mrs. Engelmann, thank you so much. It's also a great pleasure for me to welcome you to the 7th EU Cluster Conference today. Here from Berlin, from our video studio in the Federal Ministry of Economy, which was specially set up for the German EU presidency in this half year. Greetings to Brussels and to all locations from which you are connected to our conference today. Nice to have you here. And I'm also pleased that we can host this conference together with the European Commission and together with the German Go Cluster support program. Ladies and gentlemen, the aim of the EU Cluster Conference is traditionally the exchange and networking of national cluster programs and the representatives of cluster initiatives from all over Europe. It works even better when we get together personally and physically, but unfortunately that won't work this year. But I am all the more pleased that we can hold this conference anyway. And ladies and gentlemen, I am more certain that all of you, as innovative cluster managers, we have a successful exchange despite the only virtual format, and we will make use of all networking opportunities today and tomorrow. Why? If not you, who, if not you, should be able to master this successfully? Mrs. Engelmann has already addressed the particular challenges of the COVID pandemic. And indeed, clusters can make a decisive contribution here to bring our economy forward again with innovations, with new products, and with new services. They are already doing this nationally and at the European level, and we will see many good examples at this conference. Cluster managements hold the stirrups for their members. To us, the Federal Ministry of Economy, small and medium-sized companies are particularly important. Clusters help them to master the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and to become more capable of acting and more competitive again. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU Cluster Conference offers the opportunity to learn from each other and work together on solutions. Take these opportunities, make new contacts, build new relationships, share best practices, and enter into cooperation. Because together and in a network, we can achieve even more. I'm sure that we will master the current challenge together and emerge stronger from the crisis. With this in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I wish us all an exciting and insightful EU Cluster Conference 2020. Thank you very much and have a very good conference.
Thank you so much for these inspiring words. Thank you. And now I'm honored to have the privilege to welcome for the second time this year on my stage Mr. Thierry Breton, the European Union Commissioner for the Internal Markets. The floor is yours, Commissioner.
Dear Minister, lieber Peter, ladies and gentlemen, let me first thank my friend Peter Altmaier and his team for organizing this European Cluster Conference together with the European Commission. This event illustrates how important collaboration and clusters are for our economy now, I must say, more than ever. Your discussion today is happening in the context of the second wave of the outbreak that we are unfortunately all experiencing. I remember very well how clusters reacted following our informal call for action last April. In just 1 week, they gathered around 1,100 offers from 3D printing companies for masks and ventilators and dispatched them locally to hospitals. For me, It was the clear demonstration of how agile, flexible, and even creative clusters can be. I will share with you where I see the particular role for clusters in our recovery and industrial strategies. First, clusters should lead the green transition. Driving this transition requires an integrated approach. If we want to make circular economy a norm and reach zero carbon emission target, we need companies, researchers, civil societies to collaborate, accelerating green innovation and exploiting business opportunities in green markets. Companies in the EU want to green their activities. However, very often, they do not know how. And in particular, of course, SMEs struggle to shift or reshape their business model due to their limited capacity, resources, and skills. Clusters can advise and support them throughout this process. We have in Europe around 250 specialized green tech clusters. They focused on developing and bringing to the market innovative solutions. We need more of them. Second, clusters should accelerate the digitalization of our economy. This decade will be Europe's digital decade. This digital decade requires the uptake of digital solutions by everyone. And I mean everyone, every company, every region of our union. Only then we will truly realize our ambition of a digitally empowered Europe. This ambition, you can help us achieve it with 400 clusters operating today in digital technologies. Clusters need to stimulate and support the widest possible uptake of digital technologies. By 2025, we want to double the share of companies using advanced cloud services and big data. The Internet of Things, IoT, cloud computing, big data analytics, and 5G, these technologies do not only need to be deployed, their possibilities need to be fully exploited. Clusters should bridge the gap when it comes to shifting from knowledge-based manufacturing to data-driven manufacturing. We are also witnessing an increasing demand for digital skills, for data engineers, and for diverse talent pipelines. Clusters could help as they bring together the main actors in industrial ecosystems, both those demanding skills as industry and research, and those most influencing their supply as education systems and government. I am very happy that representatives of clusters activity participate in the skills roundtable I host together with my friend Commissioner Nicolas Schmit to prepare the Pact for Skills. Third, clusters should ensure resilience. We have had a cruel awakening over the past 6 months regarding health and key sectors such as protective equipment, medicines, and vaccines. We need to make our economy more resilient. Clusters could play a key role as a strategic partner for businesses and public authorities in supply chain management, in building of technology alliances, and in upskilling and reskilling our workforce. This will contribute to strengthening our strategic autonomy. Of course, this is not about isolating ourselves, but about having choices, alternative, competition. We need to avoid unwanted dependencies, both economically and geopolitically. Finally, I would like to draw your attention to the 14 industrial ecosystems in which you all operate. Ecosystems are about encompassing all players operating in a value chain, from the smallest startups to the largest companies, from academia to research, from service providers to suppliers. Clusters are an integral part of this concept. You have real-time intelligence on economic and technological development. You can detect supply and value chain disruption and act on them. And you also build bridges between ecosystems across Europe in joint cluster initiatives. I hope that your discussions in the breakout sessions per ecosystems will help us advance and strengthen our ecosystem and build more bridges between them. Together, we are strong, connected, we are resilient and autonomous. To conclude, I would like to wish you a very fruitful discussion during this European Cluster Conference 2020. Please use this opportunity for making clusters stronger to make Europe greener, more digital and resilient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Breton. And now we'll be going back to our studio in Berlin, and where I would like to welcome Mr. Peter Altmaier, representing the Germany's presidency of the Council of the European Union. The mic is yours, Minister Altmaier.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Dear Thierry Breton, Commissioner, dear Dr. Engelmann, dear Mrs. Yilkova, thank you for this warm welcome, and thank you all of you for participating in this cluster conference. It's such a pity that we cannot come together physically, personally, to have a much more intensive exchange of ideas. This is certainly one of the collateral damages of COVID-19. On the other side, there are also few collateral benefits, and that means we can make many more video conferences than we could physically attend meetings in the past. That means it is multiplying the scope of our activities, but of course, nothing can replace physical conferences. So I wish from the bottom of my heart that next time we will be able to meet with the physical presence of all participants again. We have, and thank you, Thierry, for helping us so much with this during our German EU presidency. We have been coping with distortions and collapses in supply chains all over Europe and yes, almost all over the world. There have been interruptions of supply chains between China and Europe, between car manufacturers in Europe and suppliers in Mexico. We've had, as a consequence of border controls, delays in delivery by suppliers across Europe. All this has been tackled under the German presidency because we believe whatever it means that we now have a perspective for a vaccine not only to be developed but also to be applied, and nobody knows when and for how many people this will be available. But nevertheless, we have to do our utmost to protect our supply chains, to make them more resilient, and this was an important help by the European Commission over the last couple of months. We have to prevent new trade barriers to trade, and we have to make sure that the single market will function also during the pandemic and not just in normal times. And therefore, it was so important that the resilience of the single market is being assessed, and it will help us to strengthen systematically the European economy in the context of recovery. Clusters help us to make full sense of the benefits of the single market, and by networking, they can create added benefits. The work of the European Cluster Alliance, ECA, stresses the importance of exchange between clusters at the European level. There are so many clusters. There are so many different clusters. It's virtually impossible to organize an exchange between everybody and everything. But what we can do is, by using virtual digital tools, we can have such a exchange in many regards, in many respects. When the supply chains were interrupted this spring, the ECA helped identify alternative suppliers and repair supply chains. Thank you for this. I was told impressive examples from Augsburg and other cluster regions where 3D printing was used for filling in the gaps that were caused by interruptions of supply chains. The ECA brings together an impressive 13 national cluster programs, around 740 cluster initiatives, and 123,000 companies, research institutes, and public sector organizations. I'm delighted to announce that the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy's Go Cluster program will be the 14th program to join the alliance. The Go Cluster program consists of the 84 most effective cluster initiatives from Germany, involving 13,000 stakeholders, 8,700 of which are SMEs. The energy region Nuremberg cluster, for example, brings together 100 municipalities, businesses, and research institutes. Energy region Nuremberg focuses on green hydrogen to fuel the mobility and energy transition. And by the way, all this did not happen as a miracle. It is a result and the fruit of years-long activities and efforts. For example, as far as Nuremberg is concerned, I remember that a former Bavarian Minister for the Environment, Markus Söder, who's now a prime minister of that state, as a minister of the environment, he has helped creating an enthusiasm in his region and in his home city of Nuremberg. And then the local energy supplier, Energy was his name, or still is his name, was so inspired by that they started to promote renewable energies in the region, that they started to think about how to interconnect sectors, and that an entire ecological system emerged. And this is how we have to see clusters, not only as far as the material scope of a cluster is concerned, also with regard to the historic process they cover. And of course, if you want to have good working, functioning clusters, it takes some time, but we have to start now interlinking clusters, but also creating new innovative clusters. Germany wants to make use of its membership in the ECA to make more visible the key role clusters are playing for innovation and competitiveness in Europe. And one of the characteristics of the era of digitization, by the way, is that the pace of innovation is much faster than ever before in the history of mankind. And that is an enormous challenge. How can we benefit from that for our economies? One example is the use of 3D printing in the field of research and development, because you can save so much time in the development process of new devices. The others are discussed amongst you. The EU Cluster Initiative is helpful for implementing the European Industrial Strategy. And once again, thank you, dear Thierry, for tabling this strategy. We have all told you in our council meetings that this was wonderful, a very good initiative. It is now improved even and will be then in a final wording ready in spring of next year. This industrial strategy can become a key element, the key crucial element for industrial recovery in Europe. And it is just as helpful that the Commission has identified 14 industrial ecosystems as part of her strategy. It provides good orientation for a future cluster policy. Integrating cluster policy into these industrial ecosystems will promote resilience and strategic independence, and will foster and speed up the digital and green transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, car making is another key sector in the EU. The Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy is promoting the fast and technology-neutral transformation of the vehicle industry by providing an extra 2 billion euros between 2020 and 2024. Our aim is to encourage the formation of innovation clusters. We need support from regional innovation clusters. We hope for your active participation. Challenges linked to COVID-19 are also an opportunity to make our economy more digital and climate friendly. Reconciling climate action with economic prosperity is indeed possible, and the EU aims to do just that. I would like to ask you to contribute to this over the next 2 days. I wish you inspiring discussions and a successful event. Thank you very much indeed, and stay healthy.
Thank you, Minister Altmaier. Thank you very much. And I believe everyone watching and being part of the conference today, it's really appreciating the way you've described the clusters, the importance of clusters, the work of clusters, but also appreciating the work of the European Cluster Alliance. I'm really glad to hear that, because I personally am part of this alliance, and I'm really glad to hear this appreciation of the work. And now, after the opening remarks, next comes in the program the high-level roundtable, managed and moderated by Sławomir Tokarski, Director for Industrial Policy Innovation at DG GROW. Sławomir, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you, Theodora. Good morning to everybody. We are a bit ahead of time, but I see that my panelists are very disciplined and they are all already there. So over the next hour or so, we are going to discuss about policy making. We have this 1 hour to see how to deal with pandemic crisis, both from the perspective of public administration and from the perspective of business. And I think in a certain sense, Commissioner Breton and Mr. Altmaier laid the ground already for this debate, but now maybe it's time to go more into detail and then practical advice. So let me start by a short introduction, we all have seen in the last year that coronavirus pandemic represents a very large shock for our economy, for global and EU economy, and that consequences, both economic and social, are quite severe. We see that economic activity in Europe suffered a very strong disruption in the first half of the year. We started to see some signs of the rebounding in the third quarter as containment measures were gradually lifted, but now again, we see that the resurgence of pandemic in the recent weeks puts this progress in question as more disruptions emerge as national authorities introduce new public health measures to limit the spread of pandemic. So this is where we are, and I can quote maybe now some figures from the autumn 2020 economic forecast published last Thursday. They are not cheering up. The projections say that the EU economy will contract by 7.4% in 2020, before recovering with growth of 4.1% in 21 and 3% in 22. This simply means that output in the EU is not expected to recover its pre-pandemic level in 2022. We must also be aware that the economic impact of the pandemic has differed widely across the EU, and the same is true of recovery prospects. So this is what economists term asymmetric impact. And this reflects the spread of the virus, the stringency of public health measures taken to contain it, the composition of national economies, and the strength of national policy responses. In a way, we are in a situation which is known as VUCA by this abbreviation, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But there are also some good news, and we heard some of them coming also from the Commissioner and the Minister, because we think that through this turbulence, we could have shown resilience and solidarity. We've seen unprecedented measures that have been undertaken by public authorities to help people and businesses. And EU businesses themselves, they adjusted to suddenly changing markets and supply chain disruptions. And in particular, we have seen that strong clusters, networks, platforms, alliances can ensure stability and continuity, but also demonstrate the capability to adapt and accelerate the transition to a new business model. So let us discuss now how to chart the course to recovery so that we can invest, reform, and rebuild together in a collective and cohesive way, and in a way also that accelerates the twin green and digital transition and builds resilience. So I have the pleasure to welcome and discuss with representatives from the National Public Administration. From Lithuania, we have Ekaterina Rojaka, who is a Vice Minister at the Lithuanian Ministry of Economy. From Romania, we have Katalin Bulf, Secretary of State at the Ministry of Economy. And from Germany, we have somebody whom you already know, Stefan Schnorr, who is head of the Digital and Innovation Policy Department at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. And we have also leaders from the main organizations representing business in the EU. We have Teresa de Liedekerke, who is Deputy Director General of Business Europe. We have Antonio Novo, the President of the European Cluster Alliance, and Veronique Willems, Secretary General of SME United. So we have an excellent array of speakers, and I am fully convinced that the next hour will be extremely interesting to all of us. So let me start with the first question to the panelists, which is this, and I will address this question to public authorities, to representatives of national public administration. How can public authorities support business during the COVID crisis and post-COVID recovery? So what is your experience so far? What works best? And before I pass the floor to you, I shall also say that the participants of the conference can also express their views on this question, which should be visible at the bottom of the screen with the Slido code #P781. So I think all is said. We can start now. So I will ask maybe representatives of public administration of Lithuania, Romania, and Germany to start. Ekaterina, the floor is yours, and you have 5 minutes. Over.
Thank you very much. So first of all, it's my great pleasure to be here. I actually frankly enjoy technologies and being able to be here, and then just in a couple of hours to switch to OECD colleagues in Paris. So the technologies are really overwhelming. Those possibilities are all overwhelming, and now we can often work in parallel rooms, being on parallel calls. So to some extent, we're cloning each other to be everywhere. But of course, the corona pandemic may cause the permanent damage to the economy, and specifically on some sectors. And we already see this devastating effect through the delay of the structural changes and disrupt of supply chains. It's also put pressure on the government and the debt sustainability. It might cause corporate defaults. But at the same time, what we see that the business agents are more eager to change. And here the public authorities step with their role. Because overall acceptance of change has increased, and this is really good news. Moreover, the trust in the government and institutions is rising, despite the COVID numbers are also on rise in many countries. and also including Lithuania. So thirdly, the overall importance of public sector has increased, and the pandemic has expanded its role, the role of the states in the economy. And of course, while the role of the state and the public authority become critical and will be so, at least in the midterm, and of course, the overall success will be the result of both public authorities and the business. So we cannot separate just the government and the market responsibilities in helping economies to restart after the coronavirus, as our goals are to become more agile, more resilient and innovative. And here the public authorities do play crucial roles, because what is important during the crisis, and we again see what really works, it's quick thinking, it's creativity and innovation, including the coming from the public authorities. It's reliable information and awareness. It's also planning amidst chaos and building this, enhancing government credibility and people's trust. So I believe that those are the preconditions for a good change, and changes do happen. Just look how clusters have changed. They are adapting quickly. They are developing new activities. And we also see that businesses and clusters become digitalized very rapidly, including the public sector too. And despite the situation has pushed us out of their box and out of their comfort zone, I believe that we will not be changing back after the pandemic. So we are talking not about the new normal. We're talking about total new different.
Okay, thank you, Ekaterina. Thank you for this very interesting. You were short, but very much to the point, and I like a lot this which maybe you can also discuss later on. This point about on one hand the readiness of the business community to change, to make this extra step, which maybe before that was not that obvious, and we also see how digitalization is moving ahead. Much faster pace than it was the case before, but also interesting point about improving people trust in institutions, which I think in this particular moment of history is something that is very important and relevant. So now I would like to pass the floor to my second panelist, Katalin, your turn. I think you shall switch on your mic, unmute.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. I am very nervous. I am for the first time panelist.
Don't worry. Just breathe slowly.
Dear Commissioner Breton, dear Minister Altmaier, dear Director Tokarski, and dear participants of the 7th edition of the European Cluster Conference, I wish to thank the European Commission and the Germany Presidency of the Council for giving the opportunity to present the situation of clusters in Romania, and I am honored to be here today. I represent the Ministry of Economy, Energy and Business of Romania. That institution promoted and supported the cluster policy in Romania since 2008. In Romania, we have 76 clusters. 47 of this cluster are member of Romanian Cluster Association Clustero, which is founding member of the European Cluster Alliance. By that of the evaluation of the European Secretariat from Cluster Analysis, 4 Romania cluster are classified in the gold level category, having the best performance from Eastern Europe. 17 are classified in the silver level category, and the rest being in the bronze level category at the European level. In the context of the current COVID-19 pandemic, in the very short time, the Romanian clusters have shown their full effectiveness in mobilization industrial actors, RDI organization and public authority to find quick solution to the challenges of the medical sector and the economy. A concrete example, it's e-health cluster Imagol, which has implemented 3 initiatives support in the of members, hospital and patients. First, the campaign We Are in This Together. Second, development of equipment from protection, braving with a disinfection and germicidal textile material. And third, the launching of a digital application connecting patients and pharma. I would like to highlight that the European Commission has approved Romanian scheme under the state and their temporary framework adopted by the Commission in 22 to support SMEs in the context of the coronavirus outbreak. This aid was about 3.3 billion euro. The Minister of Industry ran this aid and was 3 points. One, in order to solve the problem of the acute lack of a capital liquidity need from the investment, Minister implemented 3 measures. One, to grant, micro grant equivalent to 2,000 euro, grant from working capital ranging between 2,000 and 150,000 euro, and grant from productive investment ranging between 50,000 and 200,000 euro. Okay. With the occasion of the COVID-19 forum from industrial cluster actor, where it was mentioned the cluster need to be included in the recovery and resilience plan of the EU member state. I wish to highlight that Romania is in processing to elaborating the national recovery plan where provision from cluster and SMEs in support of green, digital and resilient transition will be included. Romania will focus among other on infrastructure, utility network, greening and digitization of industrial sector, energy efficiency, renovation, based on a country-specific recommendation issue in the context of the European semester. Support is needed from SMEs in the dual green and digital transition from the formation of culture to act from these strategic goals, and we encourage clusters to act in this direction. We look forward to the adoption of single market program to provide support to SMEs and industry in the dual transition and for internal market issues, including market surveillance. Digital Innovation Hub will play an important role in the digital transition, which we need to speed up at the level of business and citizen. We bear in mind the conclusion of the special report of the European Court of Auditor that call for acceleration the digital transition. The selection process of the National Digital Innovation Hub in order to become member of the European network was finalized in Romania and the results are publicly available. This hub will provide a national coverage in all regions and are expected to provide appropriate support. I am convinced that this event will be of great importance from the future of cluster in Europe and for asserting their role as catalyst and promoter of SMEs, competitiveness and innovation capacity. This reminds me of the similar event organized in collaboration with the European Commission in 2019 during the Romanian presidency, which proved to be a success for the European cluster community. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention and please stay safe and healthy.
Thank you very much, Catalin. I think you did very well for the first time.
Okay, next time will be better.
And thank you for giving us those very concrete examples of cluster policy measures taken in Romania. And also thank you for the reference to resilience and recovery plans. That is something we made, and the relevance of clusters for these plans. That is something we may also wish to discuss later on. So now I will pass floor to our third panelist, Stefan Schnorr. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Slavomir. And I think to your question, it's absolutely clear that we as governments, as public authorities, we must support our economy in these times, in this crisis, because we have to overcome the crisis as well as possible. And for that, we need a strong economy that will keep jobs and bring money back into the public budgets after the crisis. So this is just important as our task of protecting the health of our citizens and maintaining public life as far as possible. Therefore, even during the first lockdown in spring, the German government decided to take very extensive measures to support employees and companies. So there was emergency aid for SMEs and for self-employed, liquidity support, an economic stabilization fund, a very generous regulation for short-time work in order to save jobs. So these are only some of the measures that we take in the first half of this year. We have also expanded our existing programs and launched special support programs to soften the direct consequences of the crisis. Now, we are in the middle of the second wave in Germany, in Europe, and in most parts of the world. The German federal government has therefore taken further measures, including the necessary restrictions of public life. For example, restaurants and hotels remain closed. The culture and event industry is also particularly affected, as events are largely no longer possible. For these companies affected by temporary closures, we have started a new support program. These companies can receive up to 75% of the turnover for the same months of the previous year. This applies to companies, to self-employed and solo self-employed, and the federal government has provided additional 10 billion euros for this further support. But the money, in my opinion, is well spent because it is helping our economy in these very, very difficult times. In addition to these immediate measures, it's important that we think in perspective for the time after Corona. And we have to promote innovation and growth in order to strengthen companies after the crisis and thus bring our economy in Europe forward again. And clusters, and this is the topic of our conference today, clusters are very, very important here because they are the nucleus of innovation and the transfer of innovation into new products and new services. We have seen many impressive examples of how cluster managers have supported companies and policymakers in the past, and we will also provide information on such best practices at our conference. And clusters are usually very close linked to regional public authorities, either through direct public funding or through close cooperation. And this is also often very, very helpful. And they can also support with new and environmentally friendly technologies for recovery from COVID, including the common goals of the Green Deal and sustainability. All of these activities are not only important at the national level, so at the level of the member states, but they are extremely helpful at the European level. That is why the European cooperation between the clusters is so extremely important, and this is exactly what our conference serves. Thank you very much for this first round.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you for this very informative presentation where you mentioned the emergency aid given to enterprises in Germany, but you also made a quite nice link to the next round of speakers, because you were talking about the need to reflect on time after Corona and what clusters could do, and what should be the role of European dimension and European cooperation on this. So let me move now to the second part of the panel, and the question I would like to ask my panelists to reply to is the following: how should businesses adapt so that the recovery leads to green and digital transition and improves business resilience? So it's all nicely said, and I say it many times, while keeping afloat, you should also make one step ahead, but how to do it in practice? And again, the participants of the conference can also express their views on this question, which should be visible at the bottom of the screen with the same Slido code #P781. So now I turn to my panelists, and I will ask maybe first to take floor, Teresa. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Tokarski. Thank you for inviting us to join this very important conference. You asked a very difficult question to us, because in fact, there is not one single recipe in order to allow companies to recover from the crisis, emerge stronger, and prepare this transition. In fact, every company will have to find its own way. And in reality, they are doing huge efforts for the moment, I would say unprecedented efforts during this unprecedented crisis in order to survive and make sure that they can then continue to operate in the future. I will try to answer your question by doing two main things. First, to recall very briefly how we see the economic situation, and then perhaps say a few words about what needs to be done at the European level to support the recovery, to support companies in their efforts to survive this crisis, and also to allow clusters to continue to play the positive role that they have started to play. On the economy, you have said it, Mr. Tokarski, uncertainty remains incredibly high. Yes, we had a recovery which began during the summer, but the restrictions now had to be reintroduced because of the second wave of COVID. And in fact, the economic forecast that Business Europe has issued last week, a few days before the forecast of the Commission, is very much in line with what the Commission has found out its own forecast. So I won't go into the figures now, but it's very clear that the economic situations remains very difficult. Second point to make in relation to the economic situation is that we will only see the true damage on the economy of this unprecedented crisis once the support schemes come to an end. And therefore, it's extremely important, and the previous speakers have alluded to and explained what different countries are doing in this respect. It's very important that all the support measures are not discontinued too quickly and are continued sufficiently long in order to allow companies to survive. Second point to make is that private investment has fallen dramatically because of this crisis, and this means that public investment must temporarily fill the gap. And this is where the agreement that was reached in July in the European Council on the Next Generation EU recovery package is absolutely essential. And that brings me to the second part of the messages I wanted to bring to this conference. It's about the support that the EU can bring to companies and to ensure that clusters can continue to play their positive role. And the first thing we need, of course, to do is to ensure that there is finally an agreement and an implementation on this Next Generation EU recovery plan. Yes, the Council has agreed, but now we still need the Parliament to also agree, and the agreement between the institutions to be finalized. Second thing that we need to do is to ensure that the money that will be made available through this unprecedented plan is well spent. And for Business Europe, this means 6 things in particular. First, it means that the money must be used to enhance the capacity to generate growth and employment over the long term. Second, it means that the Green Deal and the digital are, of course, key pillars of the recovery plan because it's essential for our long-term growth capacity. But the recovery plan cannot be limited to these two pillars. We need to look beyond those pillars. Thirdly, it means that the financial arm of the recovery plan, the Next Generation EU, the MFF, must be accompanied by a strong non-financial arm. And this, by that, I mean that everything which is foreseen in the EU recovery plan about creating the condition for investment, about avoiding creating unnecessary constraints for business, about supporting clusters and innovation is just as important as the financial support that will be granted. Fourthly, it means that we need to underpin the Green Deal with a credible industrial strategy. This is absolutely key if we want the Green Deal to become a real growth driver. And the impact assessment that the Commission has published on the new 2030 targets clearly shows it. We are not there yet to make sure that the Green Deal really becomes a growth driver. We need a real business plan to mobilize investment in green technology, and this business plan is the updated industrial strategy that we need to work on. Finally, my fifth point is about digitalization. Yes, IT is enabling us to work, shop, and socialize at distance, and the crisis has clearly accelerated the path to digitalization. This may be the only positive element in this crisis, but it's also shown there is still a long way to go to compete with the world leaders in this field. So we need to do much more on the infrastructure, 5G, and on the development of IT skills. And my sixth and last message is about clusters and value chains. If we want to support the recovery, including in its green and digital dimension, we must strengthen strategically essential value chains, and as well as pan-European industrial alliances and the important projects of common European interest, the famous IPCEIs. For example, the IPCEI on microelectronics and batteries have proven their value to strengthen Europe's position in these areas. And another example is hydrogens, where we want and need to develop a coordinated European strategy to develop the hydrogen economy. So we really need to swiftly set up IPCEIs on hydrogen, on clouds, and on the other 14 strategic value chains identified by the European Commission. And we need also to explain much better how companies can get involved and can get the support foreseen in the different EU support tools, projects, and programs created by the EU. So to sum up, there are really four main messages I would like to leave with this audience at the start of the conference. Firstly, we need to avoid premature unwinding of exceptional support measures. Secondly, we need a rapid agreement and rapid implementation of Next Generation EU recovery plan, but an implementation which ensures that the money is well spent. Thirdly, we must not underestimate the importance of the non-financial part of the recovery plan. And fourth, we need to improve information to companies on how to get access to the support that the EU has foreseen for companies, because this is absolutely essential for the success of the recovery operation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Very interesting and very rich. I will maybe try to connect to 3 points that you mentioned. The point about financial and non-financial going hand in hand, I think this is also the point of view of the Commission, and this is how we see the recovery and resilience plans with the milestones for key reforms that would actually facilitate the investment that we are proposing to inject into the economy. So it is clear also for us that non-financial part of the plans is as important as the financial one. I think a credible industrial strategy, yes, we are working on this, and okay, it's too early to say what will be in the update, but clearly one of the key points will be the context of the recovery. So I think that this should take the turn that is very much advocated by you. And money well spent, indeed, because for some member states, the amounts to be invested can be quite huge. I think it is also important that we, as a commission, we also help member states to coordinate in the investment plans, that we really see a sort of ecosystem approach, cross-border approach. Just to give you one example from the tourist area, it makes little sense if only one country invests in the safe and seamless travel experience, for example, by upgrading the travel infrastructure, but the other do not follow this. Because in this case, you can leave very well from the airport that is COVID resistant, but you will still land in the airport that is COVID non-resistant. So your whole trip will be non-safe anyhow. We are working on IPCIs, we are working on hydrogen, and there is a lot of interest from the member states and from the companies. And we hope that indeed this could be a sort of example how we can de-risk the market that is very promising with 2 or 3 IPCIs in a way that later on private investment, private companies will quickly follow. And also here we see the chance in the recovery plans because quite many of the member states actually put the hydrogen economy in the plans to spend recovery and resilience facility money. Okay, with this, now I turn to my second panelist, Antonio, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, let me say thank you for the kind words from the Commissioner Thierry Breton and the Ministry Peter Altmaier about ECA. We are very glad to welcome Germany as the European Cluster Alliance 14th national member. German clusters, as non-formal collaborators, have played a key role on many of the actions organized by ECA this year. Its formal participation will, without any doubt, boost their contributions, making our common activities even stronger. And I need also to say thank you and congratulations to you, Sławomir Tokarski, and the World Cluster Unit in DigiGrow for the agile and proactive collaboration with the European cluster ecosystem, demonstrating in the best way possible what public-private collaboration is about. In the context of the crisis caused by the COVID-19, our enterprises need to rethink or redesign their business strategies to adapt them to the new social and commercial environment. This is clear. Their agility and readiness to do that will be key for their success. And while they may be aware of the importance of this task, it might be difficult for our SMEs to react quickly and effectively. Clusters are supporting them in this transition. As Commissioner Thierry Breton has mentioned during his opening speech, clusters, being collaborative ecosystems, link and integrate the needed public and private resources. Through clusters, the European companies have access to critical knowledge about the new European policy priorities and how those priorities affect their concrete business, the public and private support services covering them, and the funding opportunities that can align the company's actions with those shared priorities. Thus, clusters and cluster networks enable the development of well-designed recovery plans by linking businesses and public authorities through sectors, regions, and countries, and integrating all the critical dimensions, green, digital, resilience skills. It's not about just one dimension, and taking all of them in account, linking them correctly is crucial for the results. The new business plans need to make their activities more sustainable, wherever possible, immersing them in circular flows. Digitization is a key enabler, but not the only one. Without the right upskilling and reskilling programs, our plans are weak. We need to make our value and supply chains more resilient. It was said before. Resilience is a property of the entire network, not only of one element within that network. It is the result of the right linkages between companies and their ecosystem, reinforcing the relationship and enabling their adaptation to difficulties. Clusters act as keystone agents that link companies, universities, research organizations, and public agencies. This is also how we reduce risks or duplication of efforts and create synergies, thus saving time and funds for companies and governments. Our recommendation is connect, link, and collaborate through clusters. It will be key for the successful adaptation to our current and future challenges. The European Cluster Alliance called for the recognition of clusters as a strategic agent for the drafting and implementation of the European recovery initiatives. We call to reinforce cluster support from the European Commission and the national governments, and cluster presence and participation in the different stages of the initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio, and thank you for your kind words. I have to say that we also enjoyed very much working together with you, your regular meetings early in the morning for now almost 6 months. And we really could see throughout this cooperation how agile clusters can be. And really could see that what they offer is this network resilience, meaning simply that if small and medium enterprise is a part of a cluster, it's a much more resilient situation compared with SME, which is on its own. So I think it also provides us a good link to the next speaker, next panelist, and I would like to ask Veronique to take the floor.
Thank you, Slawomir, and also first of all, thank you for inviting me to the conference today. I'm happy to participate and give the views of SMEs across Europe on how to move forward out of this crisis. First element, and I would like to also join Teresa in the economic analysis at the moment. In the beginning of the year, we noticed that almost 40% of SMEs announced that they had liquidity shortages. At the moment, we get more and more calls from companies being confronted with solvency threats. And so our first element that I would like to put forward is make viable companies survive the pandemic. And that's the first and foremost, most important element to tackle right now. I joined Teresa in her call to continue the emergency measures as long as necessary. Minister Altmaier and also Mr. Schnorr referred to the short-time work schemes, for instance, in Germany, the income support for fixed cost compensation. I believe those measures also help our SMEs to at least try to mitigate the impact of the measures that have to be taken to make sure that health-wise we can cope with this crisis. But its next element, as I mentioned, will be providing solvency support, recapitalizing SMEs, because due to the support measures that have been offered amongst many loans, they of course also have to be repaid. Linked to the solvency support, we also call member states to put in place the early warning mechanisms that have been proposed in the Insolvency Directive from last year, which has to be implemented by next year, May, but we really encourage member states to set up these kind of mechanisms earlier to provide advice and support to SMEs in difficulties. That was the first point, making viable companies survive the pandemic. A second point is aligning the ambitious program with reality. As you know, the European economy is made up of 99.8% of small and medium-sized companies. Majority of them have less than 10 employees. You can imagine that for many, it's firefighting at the moment, making sure that they can deal with the new measures that have put in place, being it closing, trying to find a new way to deliver products and services to their clients, but also putting in place the sanitary measures to allow staff to come to work if necessary. If we then, on the other hand, see the ambitious program of the Commission, and we clearly understand it because we are challenged on several fronts, meaning the digital and the green transition as well, we need to take into account that at the moment we do not get a lot of input from those small and medium-sized companies on how those new measures will impact their functioning. So that's the first element. And if you want to put that ambitious program in place, if you want to make it real on the ground, you will need the SMEs to make sure that that happens. Another element, and Therese also referred to that one, is administrative burden and regulatory compliance. We need to make sure that on the one hand, we have the funding, the resources, the investment in place to make that digital and green transition. On the other hand, we also need to allow our companies for breathing room, making sure that they can make those new, as Antonio also mentioned it, those new business plans and those new strategies that are aligned for the current situation. So controlling administrative burden and regulatory compliance impact is another important element. And then the last one is, of course, facilitating the transition. And there we need several activities. At first, the necessary infrastructure. On the digital side, we have noticed that many SMEs in the lockdown in spring have made a transition and have very quickly transferred to a digital business model, but many of them are confronted with insufficient infrastructure. If you want to do e-commerce, you need sufficient broadband to do so. If you want to have a more sustainable way of working, you need to have a local provision of services and products that are available for the clients. That's the first element, infrastructure. Second element is the required skills. And there we see, on the one hand, the digital and green skills, but on the other hand, also, as Ekaterina mentioned in the previous part, the possibility to see opportunities to create a plan, a creative plan, and to also execute it. And for me, those are entrepreneurial skills. And those entrepreneurial skills are not only needed by entrepreneurs, but they are also very much necessary among workers. And then the last point, and that's also a very important one in this cluster conference, is the synergies and cooperation between different support structures, so that SMEs know where to turn to, and that they can access the support programs, the funding programs, and mentoring programs they will need to make this digital and green transition work in their companies. And there I would like to call on clusters, but also on the development of the ecosystems and the alliances to make sure that we really cooperate very well with the SME organizations on the ground, so that they have a good network to refer the SMEs to, and that they can turn to the necessary support when they need it. A last element, we also want to support the call to have the next generation EU agreed upon as soon as possible. And I know that trialogues are continuing today. Have it implemented, and then also in the next step, when national governments are developing their recovery and resilience plans, that they include business organizations to have a look at what are the needs of the SMEs in their country, in their regions, and making sure that their plans are really adapted to what is required over there. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Veronique. You made a number of important points, and I think that there's one overarching dimension, which is how do we ensure that this money actually reaches SMEs? It's not only taken up by big players, but it also goes to small and medium enterprises, which provide the social and economic tissue of our society. I mean, in a sense, it is this concept that was actually expressed quite recently by Thomas Piketty in his article, who was saying precisely this, that we need to ensure that recovery and resilience money goes to small and medium enterprises. You also mentioned a point on skills, and indeed, this is something very important for SMEs. This is also something where clusters can come in, because they have much more knowledge, because they know what is the strategy of the cluster development. So they're in a much better position to say to SME which type of skills will they need in the future than the SME itself, for which this process is quite costly, and often they lack sufficient information on how to do it. And in the series of Pacts for Skills, the Pact for Skills, which will be launched today, we also take care that SMEs are represented and are taken into account. And this also leads me to one more point, which was mentioned also by some other panelists, this about guiding SMEs between different support schemes. And indeed, it might be misleading because now we have a number of national European instruments, and for SME, finding its way in this maze, it's not self-evident. And again, we hope to launch a sort of first pilot projects in a sense that we are preparing a sort of resource hub for Skills Pact that will be actually guiding the applicants. So they should not know, they need not know necessarily what different instruments are. They would rather express they need, and then they will be guided by us to the best source of funding. So I hope that this could be a good example to follow also by other policy instruments. Okay, I think that now we have the results of the voting on the questions. Maybe we can see that. Okay, so how can public authorities support business during the COVID crisis and post-COVID recovery? Public investments, it was already mentioned by panelists. Facilitate collaboration and sharing business intelligence, that comes as a second. And the third point is about simplifying regulations, and then comes support services for businesses. Can we see also the replies to the second question? So how should businesses adapt so that the recovery leads to green and digital transition and improves EU resilience? Train staff, skills, enhanced use of digital tools, which now came exequo first, and then uptake of green solutions and search of new markets. Can we maybe comment a little bit on the results, because this is also the form of communication with the public? And maybe we start with in the reverse order with my business panelists. Teresa, could you say a couple of words how you see the results of the replies to the question?
Yes, thank you, Slavomir. I think it's an interesting survey, interesting results. To a large extent, I think it matches what we hear from our own members in many respects. And I think it's interesting to see that the preoccupations are very widely shared about, of course, the need for public authorities to temporarily step in to support investment, but also to work on the other aspects which allow investment to flourish in the longer term. And I'm thinking here of the various elements that were also raised in the survey that came out in terms of collaborations between different players, about the regulatory conditions, about the skills availability, etc. So it is an interesting survey which to a large extent matches with what we hear from our own members.
Thank you, Antonio.
I see it as a natural pyramid, you know, that in the basis is the skills. Skills is totally needed for everything, not only digital skill, but we could speak about also other kind of capacities, okay? With a skill, with the appropriate skills, you can become more green, more digital. And digital is also a key enabler technology for everything, even the green transition. and the circular transition. Okay, so for me it's natural. Okay, and reproduce what is needed. We need to really promote the talent, the human talent here in Europe, and based on that we can grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronique.
Yes, I think indeed training staff, as you mentioned, skilled staff is one of the key elements for an SME to be able to grow and prosper. What we saw the last 3 years was that SMEs continuously put forward that not having skilled staff hampered their growth. Additionally, what I would like to, and as you mentioned, the Pact for Skills will be launched today, and as a European social partner, we will also be very happy to support that. What I see in enhancing the use of digital skill tools and uptaking green solutions, I think that our SMEs were ready to do so. Many of our companies, especially in member states severely hit by the financial crisis of 2008, had finally regained investment capacity to really tackle the new upcoming challenges. And there, of course, we see now that investment capacity has been completely destroyed by the measures that had to be taken due to the pandemic. And there we will need to make sure that companies can again gain that investment capacity to invest in the green solutions and in digital tools. So that will be an important one. On the public authorities side, I think that indeed simplifying regulation is a very important element. And also making sure, as you mentioned, that support for business is rightly accessible for small companies is also a valid point.
Yes, thank you. If I may add to this, because I think that skills, this is something which very well illustrates this need to think about short-term and long-term at the same time, because on one hand, one way or another, we'll see some restructuring in the European economy following the pandemics, which will probably mean that people with good and interesting skills may be laid off. We saw already airlines laying off people, and this will be not limited to one or two sectors. That probably we'll see at a much larger scale, unfortunately. And if you also look at the forecasts of the economic outlook, it is indicated that the unemployment might actually raise to more than 8% in 2022. So we'll see a bit of delayed effect of the pandemics on the labor market. And it is very important that we have a sort of quick solution for this, because some people would just need a bit of reskilling in order to quickly find new jobs rather than to go through the traumatic experience of being unemployed. But at the same time, we should not lose out of sight the bigger picture, which is this quite well-known 100 million people in Europe to be trained in the next 5 years. And this is necessary if we really want people having jobs, having good jobs, and moving somewhat higher in the labor pyramid. So these are two challenges that we are supposed to and we shall really address at the same time. And I think there's also very much ambition behind the Pact for Skills. So if I turn now to our public administration participants, maybe we can see once again the result of the reply to the question concerning public administration, so that they see it with fresh eye. No, the other one, the one about how can public authorities support business during the COVID crisis. Ekaterina, what would you say?
Well, I'm very much in favor of the question and answers because increasing public investments is definitely the key to success. But I also would like to say that it's not only the public investment that is important, but also the access to finance to businesses, because we definitely should focus on the providing the liquidity now to the businesses. But in the longer range, there are viable businesses at the moment, and there are businesses that are planning their survival and even more. They are becoming more competitive during the pandemic, and for that, it is very important that they have been given fair access to financing, despite the overall vague situation on the market, despite the challenges and despite their higher risks. So I believe that the public investments are very important, but supporting private investments, which were not among the answers, is important not less. And of course, it is always important to simplify the regulations and provide services for the business. But we also see as we are more ready to changes. This is a very good time not to waste the crisis, but to embrace it and to make movements to become more agile and more resilient with all what we are doing and what we're offering to the businesses.
Thank you very much. Katalin, you mentioned that your second time will be better than the first one, so I think you merit this chance. Can you say something about how do you see the results of the poll and the replies of the participants?
First, I think for our SMEs is very important to have a good financing law, because in Romania, the financing law is not so good like in west of Europe. In another way, I want to say another things. I think cluster are in the first line in the effort of disseminating information regarding to the digital and green transition among members and through the value chains. I think the recovery and the resilience plan need to include measures dedicated to cluster and SMEs in order to contribute actively through the value chain to a green and digital economy. Also, we have great expectation from our digital innovation hub to pursue the digital transformation of the economy with direct effect in the raising productivity, uptake of artificial intelligence, automated processing, and robotics. Romania fully supports the open dialogue with the business environment in order to find the best solution from the recovery process of COVID pandemic. That I say in the second time.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know whether we still have Stefan with us. Stefan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
So okay. What do you think?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. First of all, let me say, as a representative of the German Ministry for Economy, we are not the economy. So, and we don't want to take over the job of the companies. Therefore, innovation has to be brought out by the companies. They have to optimize their business models. They have to optimize their products. And we, as governments, have to support them on this way. And in this direction, I think it's not unexpected for me that especially the public investment and also the private investment, as the colleagues mentioned, are very, very important for the companies, especially at the current situation. And we are working on this. We mentioned the IPCI projects, for example, but also a lot of other possibilities for more public and private, and this is important, for more public and private investments, for new funds, for the change of the economy, for the future, for the development, as I said, of new models. And I think clusters can help here extremely on the way for the companies to go to the next step. And as our minister announced that we will join the EU Cluster Alliance is also a very important step for our cluster. At the moment, we have in Germany over 10,000 companies who are engaged in such clusters, and there is indeed the core for new innovation. But as I said, the results are not so unexpected for me, and we are working in more investment for the companies to help them to develop the new possibilities. And it's interesting for me that the question of regulation, of reduction of bureaucracy, simplifying regulation is not so important for the companies. So I think we are on a good way here, and we have done a lot of things in the past to reduce our regulation, and I think this is also very, very important for the future, that we do not bring too much regulation in the future for the development of new business models. So thank you very much for this second round.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning, because I think it's a good end to this panel. Thank you for mentioning the innovation, because in the end, and we sometimes tend to forget it, it is the capacity of businesses to innovate that is a primary source of resilience. I mean, if you want to deal with the situations that non-standard, you need non-standard solutions, and those non-standard solutions can come only from the innovative business practices. So I think it's a good sentence to finish this panel, because I think that our time came to end. I would like to thank all the panelists for the interventions. I'm sure that participants would be uploading now if they could. And I want to give the floor back to Theodora, who is our master of ceremony today. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Slavomir, and thank you to all the panelists. It was really dynamic, and it was really great to hear the comments, the understanding, the thoughts of the government, from the governmental representatives from Lithuania, Romania, and Germany. It was also great to hear the comments of the European Cluster Alliance and Business Europe at SME United. It was great, the responses we've seen on Slido. So now we are going to, we'll have a break, a couple of options. We can have a break. You can network, use the time for your pre-scheduled meetings. Also, you can visit the exhibition area, or you can take part in the cluster management quiz, which will be led by Mr. Alan Tubiana, Head of Master Program in Cluster Management at University of Strasbourg. So these are the options. Please come back with us at for the next session after the break, or one of those activities.